find out where my weaknesses are, and I would bring on other people to help me. The solopreneur tries to do it all, but there's no foul in saying, look, I'm not great at this, and I'm going to see if I can find somebody, even if it's like on a 5 hours a month basis, to come in and help me.
Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
You've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Operations is a really big challenge, especially when it comes to consumer packaged goods. And today we're going to be talking to George Bryson. He's a fractional COO, and he helps businesses specifically in those consumer packaged goods either get off the ground on their startup or help them if they're having some kind of operational trouble. How are you doing today, George?
I'm doing well. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us. I know you're busy, so we'll jump right into it. Can you give the audience a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what it is kind of your elevator pitch for your fractional COO service?
Yeah, so I am in the consumer packaged goods space. I've been in this space in one form or another since 1996. I work with startups, and I work in operations, and I've started new functions within big corporations, and in consulting, I've helped clients start new functions. But for the most part, for the last 15 years, I've been in the beverage space and consumer packaged goods space, building new markets for brands, or building my own startup brand, and then coaching and consulting with other startups.
Wonderful. Startup game is so much fun. It's one of my favorite places to be. That's why I like the hosting industry so much, because I feel like I'm always having to restart up the business because every year something new pops along. Now, you've not always been your own boss as a freelancer, fractional COO. Can you tell us a little bit about, you worked for a pretty big water company, not a water company, I guess they sold water. Do they call it Fuji a water company or a packaged goods company?
It's a water company. It's part of the Wonderful company, which has Palm Wonderful, nuts, and a bunch of other business lines too.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the decision to, I would consider Fuji like a juggernaut in the water space, and you opened a giant market for them, but then you made the decision to leave that and go to what would seem to be a less stable environment for that next part of your career. Can you tell us a little about that transition and what it was, what it took mentally to get through that? You want to talk about, the family trials or whatever you had to go through, that also would be fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, probably it's important to, before I worked for Fiji, I was in management consulting before. And then I had the opportunity to work at Target Corporation. And I was in a merchandising strategy role there. It was early 2000s, and Target was one of the leaders in using customer data. And one of the amazing experiences about Target was, first of all, in the early 2000s, Target was clearly a pioneer in retail, but I got to meet a lot of founders, a lot of smaller brands, a lot of, I worked with the big companies too, the big suppliers, but I got to really see under the curtain of how, behind every brand at Target, there is a team, a person. Every major company was a startup at one point. And so when I had a chance to go, I had an opportunity to go work with the Wonderful company in LA on the acquisition of Fiji Water. So I joined that. I moved from Target to the Wonderful company. And then I worked on that acquisition. I gravitated towards new markets in that experience. And it was, Fiji at the time was a successful business when it was acquired, but what's happened, what the Wonderful company brought to it was a tremendous amount of energy and growth. And I was part of the early stages of that, opening up new markets. And the biggest market I opened was Canada for Fiji. There was a little bit of business up there before I joined from the previous owner. But I built that market out from scratch. And
a small market. Just a country.
It was, yeah. So Canada it's a very interesting market, and it has a lot of the challenges, from logistics and distribution. So I pretty much put the whole thing together. I had a huge infrastructure around me,
right,
a company behind me. So it wasn't being a solopreneur in that sense, but I was able to build a team work with, distributors, two guys in a truck type distributors, all the way up to eventually the Canada Dry organization took on distribution, the big national distributors. And it got to a point at Fiji where we were opening up new markets. In my last role there, I was responsible for South America, Middle East, Africa, and India. And in India, I was working with the team out of Singapore. And it was on one of these trips across Eurasia that I realized, like, these products, like, first of all, I wanted to be home more. That was part of the driver. I had a 2-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, and I was gone every week essentially for years. It was on a trip through Eurasia. I was in Singapore, Dubai, and Mumbai all in a week. And there was the same juice in my fridge, my minibar, at all 3 hotels. And there were 3, different classes of hotels too. And it struck me like these products were made, and somebody made these, and that got me very excited about creating my own product line then.
Right. Okay. So you see that and then you say, I'm going to quit Fuji and then go into the startup world, or was it a little bit bigger transition than that?
No, it was more, probably a little bit more impulsive than that. It was more like, I don't want to go on these 2-week trips across Eurasia I came back from my trip, and actually in Dubai, I found the company, somebody who could manage that market for them who wanted to live there and not fly there.
Okay.
And I came back and said, look, this doesn't make sense. This role doesn't make sense that you have me in. And then the company was going through a transition. I decided it was a good time for me to take a package and just go dive into my own business.
Awesome. And right then you start off consulting with startups, or did you start your own and consulting at the same time?
So I did a little dabbling with some other people I knew in the world who had startup ideas, and I began to just dive into conversations. A friend of mine who had a beverage idea, from a recipe that her mom had created. And I kind of put a little sketch around it, and it's like, this is what it might cost to do. I just started the wheels turning. I didn't say no to anything. If somebody had an idea they wanted to talk to me about, I would meet them for coffee and talk. At the same time, I began working on my own drink business, and it really informed me. I find, like, if I talk to somebody else about somebody with a plant nutrition product,
right,
I could talk to her, and I could come away with some insight that could help me with my juice, even though it's a completely different category.
Right.
Just having that awareness. And
so you launched a product called Wild Poppy. Is that correct?
Wild Poppy, yeah. Wild Poppy juice is originally. Yeah.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about what the product was? Yeah,
so it's a fruit-based beverage product. It came together from my trip through Eurasia. There was this drink. It was an Australian juice that was in all these mini bars. And I was thinking, California has the best fruit, some of the best fruit on earth.
Right.
In fact, it's a different story, but I'd done a volunteer project once to help a retired gentleman who was looking to support fruit orchards in Iraq during the middle of the war.
Okay.
And so he and I did a trip up to Modesto, and we met this incredible fruit farmer who makes the hybrid fruit for all these climates and markets. So, it's possible if you're sitting somewhere else in the world eating a peach, that peach originally was hybridized from a farm in Modesto, California. And so this is where the wheels started turning. And I was thinking, like, why aren't there more products using California fruit? There's a company out of Fresno that loads up crates of stone fruit onto 747s and flies into Saudi Arabia every day. But in California, our fruit is more of a commodity. We treat it more of a commodity in the state. And so that's where the wheel started turning. So I played around with a lot of different options. I played around with the candy and, sauces and other things, but juice really made sense for me. I knew beverage. One of Fiji Water's major success factors is that it's a beverage that works in on-premise, and it's in some ways it's kind of like a cocktail alternative. If you go to a nice restaurant, you can order Fiji. I started thinking, that was where I really started thinking about how to create a juice that would be a non-alcoholic option for a bar or restaurant.
Okay, that's a good line. Now, you had an exit on that company. I think you said 2018.
Yeah, 2018. we'd launched a soda, an organic soda, and I did what I know, like people had told me not to do before I did it, and then I now tell people not to do it. As I went fast, I grew very quickly, and the wheels started coming off the wagons here and there. But it's
right.
And I use those stories in my coaching today too, and I think it's I see a lot of the similar patterns. But yeah, so I worked on an exit that year. The promise was that they would come and like help us, be a part of something bigger.
Right.
Moving from a 3-person operation to being part of a bigger company that had a portfolio of brands.
Right. But that didn't go like you expected it to go, which is really common in equity roll-ups, right? Some things get lost, and that's a shame. So you've got a good history with Target, Fuji Water, opening up major markets, your own thing. Now you're in the consulting gig. You've got some giant wins from opening giant markets. You've got some experience in doing it yourself. Now you're consulting. So if somebody has a consumer packaged good specifically in that beverage world, if you've got an idea or you're up and running already and you wanted to work with George, how would they get in contact with you? And what are some of the offers that you might have for them?
Yeah, sure. So I have a website. It's georgebryson.io. And I'm currently marketing, the website introduces who I am and how I define operations as a fractional COO in the consumer packaged goods space. And then what I'm specifically focused in on right now is I do a lot of mentoring. I'm in Austin, Texas now is where I'm based. And this is undoubtedly one of the CPG hotbeds in America for startups. A lot of really great brands are here, and I get to mentor with a lot of startups. And what's come together is I've created a coaching program for early stage startups who have an idea, they have a product, they're ready to launch it, and they know they need to fundraise. And so really I'm focused in on, so it's time to fundraise. And my program's called Fundraise with Purpose. And we're just kicking off our first round, first cohort next week. And we'll see how this develops. But I know like that's a need in the market right now. And so that's something I've created a program around.
Fantastic. So early March is when that program's going out. Now, you've created a 4-step. I don't know if it's 4 steps or is it 4 key fundamentals that you need to do before you even ask for money, before you even go into that fundraising step. Can you go over those 4? Are the steps or processes?
Well, it's a little of both, and we'll see how this develops, because I've done this now where, in my last role at a company, I was full on. This was after my startup.
Right.
I joined a group that had a sports drink, and I helped them build distribution to get that off, accelerate that.
Right.
But
obviously there's more than 4 things that you have to do before you can start a business, but can you walk through your 4 fundamentals things that need to be done?
Yeah. So the 4 fundamental, you'll hear a lot of this. You need to know what you have in the market, your product, what's the why of your product. And, there's a lot of great commentary and literature on that. But for me, I think, more than just what the why of your product is like, where are you going to find your best customers? Who are your best customers? And where are they? Are they online? Are they at Target? Are they at gourmet grocery stores? Are they, primarily at restaurants? But like, what are your best customers? And like having a clear avatar for who you're really going after, to me, it's the first foundational step. And then once you have that, the second step is to really dig into, what your product is. You have your idea. There's so many genius ideas out there, but what's the cost of actually making it? And you hear this a lot from the more seasoned veterans. I just heard someone last week saying this, and they almost say it under their breath. Your margins are so important in your business, and selling your product is your leading source of revenue for your business. And it seems so obvious, because so many startups are caught up in the mode of, I got to just keep fundraising to keep feeding the beast. But the truth is that it's true that your revenues are a massive source of your profits. You're feeding your company. It's the best way to fundraise. And if so that second step is so important to figure out what your actual costs are, not just today, because, as you're in prototype mode, your costs are going to be out of hand. I mean, they're going to be prototype costs, but, where can you reasonably get to, can you expect to get to when you scale your business? So if you're at some level of scale, what are your costs going to be? And then you price accordingly. So really setting your costs and your price structure. Well, it'll define your entire startup experience. And I can share personal stories on that too, where I've gotten it right, I've not gotten it right.
Right.
So that's once you have those, then your channel plan becomes everything. So I know who I'm going after, who my best customers are, and I know what I'm going to have to charge for it to make it a real business that's going to be self-sustaining at some point. So what are the channels? What are the best ways to reach those customers? Sometimes it could be a mass market play. Other times it may be that you need to start at the very high end, gourmet. It's if you have an $8 drink, you're probably going to have to, that should shape the way you think about approaching the market and the channels you go into. So creating that channel plan of yours. And then finally, I'm a big proponent for fundraising. So at that point, you're going to fundraise. And frankly, this applies to even if you're self-funded, because, if you're pulling money out of one account to another to pay for your fund, you're still fundraising, right? You're just fundraising from yourself. What's your cash flow model tell you need? Like, go for a numbers-based answer to how much money you need to achieve your goals. Like I tend to advise, these things are like snowflakes. A good friend of mine who started his own beverage company described it that way. But a snowflake has an engineering pattern too, right? There's a structure to it. And so I tend to caveat where your business might require you to do a little bit different than what I'm saying. But as a rule, as a business, you want to have a 36-month plan. Where do I want to be in 3 years? Not in 5 or 10 years, but in 3 years. 5 or 10 years is more of a dream for the brand. Anything shorter is kind of tactical. But what do I want this business to be in 3 years? And then create an 18-month cash flow model that tells you exactly how much cash you need to get there. And if you're
right.
if you have a high risk tolerance, you might raise a little less and just wing it a little bit. If you're super conservative, then maybe you want to raise 24 months, right? And do a 20%.
Absolutely. So just to quickly summarize, we're talking about who am I going to sell the product to, right? The customer persona, which is wildly important. I think where a lot of people get mixed up here is that they want to sell it to everybody and they don't niche down enough. And what my caveat to that is that you're going to have multiple customer personas. Anytime that I do a customer persona exercise with somebody, we do it 3 times. I want 3 different customer personas and I want them to look pretty different from each other, right? The second one is know your margins, how much you're going to sell it for. So who am I going to sell it to? How much am I going to sell it for? And then my distribution channels, right? How am I going to get it in their hands? And then the final one is how much money do I need to raise, right? Because I remember when I was a kid, I tried to raise some money for a website and they kept asking me well, what am I investing in? I'm like, well, you're investing in the website and how much do you need? I'm like, well, I don't know. How much can you give me? And it was, I didn't get the money. I scratched my head then, really confused. I don't know why they didn't give me the money. This is a great idea. And I did a horrible job of explaining why I needed the money, how much money I needed, all those things. So knowing what you need and having a plan is really important, but it's guesswork, right? I mean, when you're starting a company, and I talk to a lot of business owners and they have these hockey stick projections, right? Oh, we're going to launch, we're going to go through R&D. And as soon as we hit the market, we're going to be, this wild growth instantly. And it so seldomly doesn't happen. So when you're making that forecast, obviously your risk tolerance is a huge part of that forecast. When I do forecasts, I'm probably the most conservative I ever get as far as when I'm doing my forecasts. Do you have any tips or tricks on getting somebody over the fact that, this is guesswork and you're making your best guess at what you think is going to happen based on what that your output can be, right? At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Or, I mean, you could just have a crappy product that doesn't sell. That's always a possibility as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes a product isn't. It's usually not a crappy product. It's usually it's mistargeted, right? The market's not as big as you thought it was, right?
Right.
For what you imagined people wanted. So the thing about guesswork, I guess I go back, way back to my academic training, and I got a master's in political science, international relations, and I did work in political science for my master's degree, which led me to do analytics in management consulting, which led me to do behavioral studies, target on customers, and I think behaviorally, data is so important. You can study what seems like guesswork by looking at the data. And so, like, for me, it's just I believe it. Like, you can predict, you can get into 5 7-Elevens and watch traffic over 5 weeks and actually create a reasonably accurate forecast of how your product's going to perform. I mean, I haven't found too many cases where, other than, and I know startups have their one-offs, and you always have your unicorns, right? You have a store that moves, 10 times the volume of any other store in your network. Right. And sometimes you find out, it's because they put it right at the cash register, and you're like, okay, then you have to be honest with yourself when you do the analytics. Do you, if you know that store gave you 6 displays by the cash register, you probably don't want to forecast 5,000 stores at that same volume.
Right. However, you can take that knowledge and say, hey, this is a scenario that happened. If you want to turn this product over, put it up by the register, right? Knowing, like, being center aisle versus end cap versus at the register, those all are different key performance indicators on how you're going to sell that product, right? And, and I don't sell retail. I sell very, very, retail is maybe 5% of my entire revenue stream, right? So I'm not doing retail very much, and I probably do it very poorly. Is there specific tips and stuff to get at that end cap, or is it just brand?
You mean to actually secure the placement, or? Yeah. So nothing replaces, nothing's as good as a founder who's willing to walk into a store and set it up.
Oh, really?
Create a personal engagement.
Okay.
Every market has a store, grocery store 2 or 3. LA has more than other places, and but there's always a chain or 2 in town, or a store or 2 in town that will play with you. If you walk in and say, look, I have this cool product and I want to try it out here, do you mind if I put it by here? I'll give you a free display. You can even free fill it. It's not, you're in there and you have skin in the game, and then you come in and merchandise it yourself. And I've always had a certain number of stores that I merchandised myself.
Okay.
Even if I had to fly to Canada to do it when I was building.
And that's almost like a consignment deal then?
No,
you give the product to the grocery store to see how it turns over.
Yeah, you can. I mean, when we were, you can. That's one easy way to do it. Is you give them a sampling. You give them 3 of each, a case of each, whatever you're feeling at the time, whatever you can afford, and or the right. You don't want to overfill the store, because then they'll move the product, or they'll send some of the product home with them. It doesn't fit on the shelf and it gets lost and back. But if you can fill a nice shelf, a nice spot at a store, I've found that you can always find a store manager, even if it's a chain store like a 7-Eleven. You can find somebody who will be willing to give you the space and let you play. And then you start, like, over 2 or 3 weeks. Oh, we're moving 12 bottles a week, 18 bottles a week, 3 bottles a week. You start to learn, you start to get your patterns, and you create your initial hypotheses, and then you test them, and then you do 5 more 7-Elevens, and you see. I mean, I don't want to share confidential data, but the numbers are wild.
I think what I'm hearing, and there's probably thousands of people watching right now that have a product, have an idea, and like, I got to sell my first one, right? And maybe they call you, maybe they don't. You just walk into 7-Eleven, ask for the manager, ask for the owner.
It's usually a lot of owners are there, the 7-Elevens, or is somebody who works with the owner.
I know the owner of my local 7-Eleven. He's there all the time, right? If I had a product, I could probably ask him. But I think a lot of people are stuck in I've got to go through all these corporate channels and do it this corporate way. At the end of the day, if you want something done and you need something from somebody, just walk in the door and ask them. Sometimes it can literally be that simple, right? Yeah. Be ready for a lot of no's, right? If you really want to do it, just ready. You should be ready for at least 100 no's. Like, if you're going to add the first 100 asks, right? Be ready for that. Prepare yourself for it. And then if you're ready for it, it's going to happen less than you think it might. But you got to be able to know that you're going to the next door as soon as you get that no, right? And then at one point, you'll be very happy when that person's calling you and saying, hey, I want my product in my store, right? So fantastic. George, I've had a blast. Do you have anything you'd like to leave the audience with? Any special tips, words of knowledge, you know, how they should be moving forward in their startups or their beverage business?
Yeah, so that's a big question. You know, keep at it. Like the beauty and texture of the world comes from startups. Like everybody was a startup once before, and from everything I'm seeing, the trends and what I hear from, you know, the trend studiers, that people want more and more diversity in their products. And it's never been a better time for a startup to get something new and innovative in people's hands. So keep at it, but balance that time with your vision. Most startups are run by a visionary who came up with a really great idea and they're running with it. Take the time to also think about the engineering of the business to get there. And you know, one of the things that I, you know, what would I do differently? I would find out where my weaknesses are, and I would bring on other people to help me. The solopreneur tries to do it all, but there's no foul in saying, look, I'm not great at this, and I'm going to see if I can find somebody, even if it's like on a 5 hours a month basis, to come in and help me.
Still have to taste it to know that you're not good at it or know that you don't like it, right? Like I'm pretty good at doing the daily accounting. I don't like doing it, and I never thought I'd be good at it. But I'm good at it, so I do it. It keeps me, in brush with like what's going on financially each day, right? It keeps you really, really close to it. So I've actually learned that I do like that task, but sometimes you got to try a bunch of things, figure out what you're not good at, be honest with yourself with it, and outsource that piece.
Exactly.
Right? Especially if you don't like doing it, I'd say outsource it as soon as possible, because it's you have to like what you're doing if you're going to be doing it for 10, 12 hours a day.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So, awesome, George. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.
That's it for today's show, folks. If you'd like to join my text line community, the number is 314-370-2871. Get to work.